Cleveland woke up to more than a loss. It woke up to a story that refuses to go away. What looked like a single play at the end of a close game turned into a national argument about trust, coaching, and whether one decision can derail a rookie's confidence. Shedeur Sanders threw like a veteran. Big drives, calm pocket play, throws that flipped a game on its head. Then, in the moment that mattered most, the coach pulled him off the field and ran a trick play that failed. That choice didn't just cost points. It cracked open every question fans had been whispering all season. This isn't just about an X's and O's debate. It's about how narratives form and who gets to shape them. Local insiders who once doubted Shedeur are suddenly offering soft apologies. National voices like Tom Brady cut straight to the core of the issue, arguing this wasn't merely a bad call, but a failure of leadership that could stunt a young quarterback's growth. And when the GOAT frames your problem as a trust issue, the conversation changes from "did the play make sense?" to "can this coach build a franchise?" But there's another layer here, the one people don't always see on highlight reels: the backstory of doubt, the camp chatter, and the clips that get reused until they become truth. Some outlets pushed a narrative about Shedeur's readiness in August. Other insiders now say those early takes were wrong or worse, part of an organized message. Those are serious claims, and they're being reported as such. Reports claim, insiders say, rumors suggest. We'll treat them carefully. Facts first, speculation labeled. What makes this story addictive is the collision of redemption and accountability. A rookie who looked like a revelation, a coach whose decision invites national scorn, an owner, and a direction of a franchise that's hunted for a true quarterback for years. This video will walk through the drive, the decision, the national fallout, and the possible outcomes, laying out verified facts, flagging rumors, and asking the question every fan is already shouting in the replies. How do you manage a young star when the people around him seem to be fighting the same fight? Before any controversy, before any analysts went viral, there was the drive, the moment when Shedeur Sanders stopped being the rookie with potential and became the heartbeat of the entire Browns offense. This wasn't luck. It wasn't a hot streak. It was command, calm, and precision that made the Titans' defense look like they were just trying to survive. And that's exactly why what happened afterward felt so unbelievable. The drive began with tension hanging over the stadium. Cleveland was trailing, time was disappearing, and the pressure on a young quarterback of panicking. Shedeur started dealing. First snap, clean strike. Second play, a laser into a tight window. Every read was on time. Every throw had intention. The offense, which had been inconsistent earlier in the game, suddenly looked synced because he forced them into rhythm. You could feel the energy shift. The crowd did too. By the time Shedeur completed the final touchdown pass that capped off an 80-yard march in 7 plays, even his critics had to admit he wasn't just surviving the moment, he was owning it. The stadium was roaring, teammates were celebrating, and the momentum was so unmistakable that analysts watching the live broadcast commented on how unusually poised he looked for someone who'd only started a handful of NFL games. It was the kind of drive where quarterbacks earn locker rooms. It was the kind of drive franchises build futures around. And that's exactly why because after doing everything right, after earning the right to finish what he started, Shedeur was suddenly on the sideline, helmet unbuckled, watching a wildcat formation take the field for the 2-point conversion. Fans didn't understand it. Analysts didn't understand it. Even players on the sideline looked confused. How do you pull the hottest player on the field at the most important moment of the game? What message does that send to a rookie who just proved he can rise under pressure? That decision didn't just change the tone of the game. It set off a chain reaction that would explode across sports media in the hours that followed. Normally, when a controversial coaching decision hits the headlines, it's the standard cycle. Local media debates it, fans argue on social platforms, and national analysts give a quick opinion before moving on to the next storyline. But this time, the script flipped the moment Tom Brady, the most decorated quarterback in NFL history, decided he wasn't going to sit quietly and let this one slide. And the way he spoke about it didn't just critique the call. It shattered the foundation beneath it. Brady was in the Fox Sports broadcast booth, doing what he's paid to do: break down the action, give insight, sprinkle in some humor. But when the conversation turned to Kevin Stefanski's decision to pull Shedeur Sanders for the two-point conversion, his tone shifted instantly. You could hear the disbelief tightening in his voice. This wasn't Brady casually reviewing a play. This was Brady speaking as someone who's been in that exact moment hundreds of times. Someone who understands exactly what a quarterback feels when his coach either believes in him or doesn't. He started by restating the facts, but the way he did it made the decision sound even worse. 364 yards, 3 touchdown leading throws, a flawed command of the offense. Then Brady paused, not for drama, but because even he couldn't wrap his mind around what came next. And then, he said, when it really counts, you take him off the field? That single line detonated across the internet. Because when Brady questions something, he's not just offering an opinion, he's issuing a judgment backed by experience, championships, and an understanding of quarterback psychology that few humans on Earth possess. And he didn't stop there. His voice sharpened as he went on. Great coaches trust their best players. They adapt in the moment. They don't abandon what's working because of one earlier mistake or a pre-planned idea drawn up days before. He even went as far as calling the decision coaching malpractice, a phrase that spread online almost immediately. For fans, Brady didn't just echo their frustration, he validated it. For analysts, his critique forced them to reconsider their takes. For players, especially those in Cleveland's locker room, it signaled that the feelings they couldn't say publicly were shared by someone above reproach. And while Brady's comments caused the first shockwave, they were just the beginning. Because the fallout wasn't just national. It hit the Browns organization where it hurt most. If Tom Brady's critique was the spark, the reaction inside Cleveland was the explosion. The moment his words hit the broadcast, the conversation around Shedeur Sanders and Kevin Stefanski shifted from a local debate to a full-blown franchise crisis. It wasn't just fans arguing anymore. It was analysts, former players, and even people inside the Browns organization quietly acknowledging that something deeper was happening beneath the surface. Inside the locker room, the mood wasn't anger as much as it was confusion. Players just fought through an 80-yard drive, were still replaying the moment they turned to look at the sideline and realized Shedeur wasn't going back out for the conversion attempt. Wide receivers who had just run flawless routes and made tough catches felt blindsided. Offensive linemen who had finally gained momentum suddenly weren't part of the biggest play of the game. That kind of decision doesn't just affect strategy, it affects trust. And in the NFL, trust is the glue that holds tight games together. Reports suggest that several players were watching Brady's comments in real time, nodding along, not because they were trying to start drama, but because someone had finally said what they couldn't. Others shared the clip privately, letting it be known without saying a word. This is what we've been feeling. Again, these are reports, rumors, and inside talk, but they paint a picture that aligns with what fans saw unfolding on the field, from the decision-making happening above them. Meanwhile, within the front office, things became tense quickly. Rumors circulated that Jimmy Haslam had called an emergency meeting, a phrase that sent the fan base into a frenzy. Whether the meeting was about job security, future planning, or damage control wasn't immediately clear, but the timing said plenty. Owners don't hold emergency sessions after good press. They do it when something threatens the direction of the franchise. And make no mistake, Shedeur Sanders is the direction of the franchise now. His rapid growth, calm under pressure, and natural leadership have made it nearly impossible to justify decisions that don't align with his development. Stefanski's choice wasn't just questioned. It was seen as a direct obstacle to the team's future. The organization suddenly found itself in a position no team wants. Their rookie quarterback had all the momentum, and their head coach had all the questions. But the storm wasn't done building, because while Cleveland was scrambling internally, the national media doubled down. Once Tom Brady's comments hit the airwaves, the national media didn't just react. They swarmed. What might have been a one-day conversation suddenly became the headline on every sports show, debate table, and football podcast across the country. And the tone wasn't neutral. It wasn't cautious. It was pointed, amplified, and overwhelmingly aligned with the idea that Kevin Stefanski had crossed a line no coach should ever cross with a young quarterback on the rise. ESPN opened their morning segment with Brady's quote replayed in slow motion, breaking down every word like it was testimony in a courtroom. Analysts who normally avoid criticizing active coaches leaned forward in their chairs, openly questioning not just the decision, but Stefanski's entire philosophy with Shedeur Sanders. Even those who tried to defend themselves swallowed by the momentum, because the narrative now had a life of its own, and it wasn't slowing down. On FS1, former players reacted with a kind of visceral frustration that only athletes who've lived through similar situations can express. Shannon Sharpe, for example, didn't mince words. He called Stefanski's decision self-inflicted chaos, adding that no coach should ever take the ball out of the hands of the one player who had kept them alive. This wasn't speculation. It was the emotional, experience-tested perspective of someone who'd seen locker rooms fracture over much smaller decisions. Meanwhile, on NFL Network, analysts debated whether the incident would permanently damage the relationship between Stefanski and his young quarterback. Rumors, again, clearly labeled as rumors, spread that other teams noticed the moment as well, with some executives privately saying that if Cleveland didn't watch Shedeur, where would be 10 around him tomorrow? But what truly made this moment explode was how current players reacted. Without saying a word publicly, they liked posts, shared clips, and boosted reactions supporting Brady's take. In the NFL, online behavior is coded language, a silent signal of where you stand. And those signals overwhelmingly pointed in one direction. Shedeur had earned the right to finish that drive. By the end of the day, this wasn't a controversy anymore. It was a referendum on coaching philosophy, player trust, and the future identity of the Browns. And with pressure mounting from inside and outside the building, the organization suddenly faced a question they could no longer avoid. What happens if the rookie has already outgrown the structure around him? While national media hammered the coaching decision from every angle, something even more revealing was happening behind closed doors. Something that told a much deeper story any statistic or highlight reel ever could. The Browns' locker room, usually careful to project unity, suddenly found itself quietly divided. Not in a dramatic, shouting match kind of way, but in the subtle, unmistakable shift of a team deciding who it believes in when the pressure hits its peak. Players talk. They always have. And when a quarterback leads you down the field for 80 flawless yards, only to be pulled off the field for the most important play of the game, guys notice. Wide receivers who fought through tight coverage looked confused. Offensive linemen, who had just protected Shedeur through the biggest drive of his career, suddenly found themselves watching from the sideline as a wildcat formation trotted out. Even defensive players, who had nothing to do with the moment, reportedly asked each other what the thought process was. These aren't rumors meant to stir drama. Momentum and chemistry shift in real time. And when you take the ball out of the hands of the guy who created that momentum, it sends a message louder than any sideline speech. We don't trust you enough yet. That message didn't sit well. Veteran leaders like Myles Garrett, while careful with their words publicly, gave responses that were almost too measured. He praised Shedeur, highlighted his growth, and talked about how well the rookie had played, but noticeably avoided praising the decision-making behind the two-point attempt. It wasn't anger, but it was clarity. Leaders don't call out coaches directly, but they do send signals, and Garrett sent his. Then there were the younger players, the ones who relate to Shedeur's journey, who see themselves in his grind, who understand what it means to earn respect in a league that doubts you by default. They were the most vocal behind the scenes, according to reports. They felt the decision robbed Shedeur of a defining moment, one that could have reshaped not just his season, but the psychology of the entire team. And here's where things got even more complicated. Many inside the organization reportedly believed that if Shedeur had been given the chance, he would have converted. Not because the play was guaranteed, but because momentum, the real kind, the emotional kind, was on his side. Momentum is something players feel long before coaches acknowledge it. And in that moment, the locker room wasn't aligned with Stefanski. It was aligned with Shedeur. But the story doesn't end with trust. The next chapter brings up something far more volatile: the resurfacing of old narratives and the people pushing them. Just as the Browns community was settling into a clear narrative, Shedeur earned the moment, the coach took it away, and the team felt the fallout. Something unexpected had been flipped. Suddenly, certain media voices started revisiting the same narratives from August, pushing them back into the spotlight right when the heat on Kevin Stefanski was reaching its peak, and the timing wasn't subtle. Reports claim that insiders began circulating the idea that Shedeur wasn't putting in the work early on. Others suggested he needed humbling or that he didn't fully grasp the playbook. These claims weren't presented as fresh information. They appeared suddenly and conveniently in response to criticism of Stefanski's decision-making. That alone raised eyebrows, because if these issues were real, why weren't they reported when they supposedly happened? Why didn't the biggest skeptics within the media mention these concerns during training camp? Why did these narratives magically appear only after Shedeur delivered historic numbers and the coach found himself under a microscope? It didn't add up, and players knew it, fans knew it. Even analysts who weren't pro-Shedeur questioned the timing. It looked less like genuine reporting and more like retroactive justification. A way to soften the backlash Stefanski was facing by shifting focus back onto the rookie. But the problem was simple. The narrative didn't match reality. The GM traded away veteran quarterbacks. The coaching staff elevated Shedeur into the starting role. Teammates consistently praised his preparation and leadership. National analysts highlighted his maturity, football IQ, and calm under pressure. Those are facts, not speculation. Meanwhile, the claims about work ethic were inconsistent at best. If Shedeur supposedly wasn't dedicated, why would he develop so rapidly? Why did multiple insiders previously report he was in the building early, grinding film with Stefanski, and absorbing the offense at a lightning? Speed? Why did that praise get buried, yet vague accusations suddenly resurfaced the moment the coach needed cover? It was transparent, and honestly, it backfired. Instead of defending Stefanski, the recycled narratives made it look like certain voices were more invested in protecting the coach than telling the truth. They ended up validating the very criticism they were trying to disprove. Because when narratives keep changing depending on who's being blamed, people start asking a bigger question. If Stefanski really believed in his rookie, why were so many excuses needed? And that question leads directly into the next major shift. The moment outside voices, including former players, decided to step in and set the record straight. As the recycled narratives about Shedeur's work ethic and maturity spread across the airwaves, they didn't last long. Not because fans rejected them, but because what they were talking about. Former players, insiders with direct access, people familiar with Shedeur's background, stepped in and dismantled those claims piece by piece. And they did it publicly, decisively, and with receipts. The first major pushback came from voices who had been observing Shedeur closely since his college days. They pointed out something that critics conveniently ignored. Shedeur has always been accountable, always composed, and always team first. Even during high-pressure college moments, he was known for deflecting praise and redirecting credit toward teammates. Videos resurfaced of him pausing post-game press conferences to remind reporters that others deserved attention too. Something that simply doesn't match the entitlement narrative some media outlets were trying to revive. Then came the stronger responses, the ones that made the national audience pause. Analysts like Chris Sims, who evaluate quarterbacks for a living, stepped in with their own assessments. Sims didn't speak in vague generalities. He spoke about film study, processing speed, pocket presence, and the rare calm Shedeur displays under duress. He made it clear, this wasn't a guy who lucked into success. This was a quarterback who understood the game, who grew rapidly, and who played with a maturity far beyond his years. But the real turning point came when individuals close to Shedeur spoke up. One of the most notable responses came from people inside his own circle, who flat out rejected the false narratives being pushed. They reminded the public that these criticisms weren't new. They were the same recycled talking points that had followed him since college, often sparked by out-of-context clips or media outlets with agendas. They also pointed out how absurd it was to claim a quarterback wasn't development and elite decision-making. Then came the point that quieted the room. If Shedeur was lazy, unprepared, or immature, why did his teammates rally behind him? Why did the GM trade away multiple veterans to clear his path? Why did a Hall of Famer like Tom Brady praise his leadership and composure? Those aren't opinions. Those are facts grounded in actions, not speculation. Once former players and insiders began calling out the inconsistencies, the old narratives crumbled. What remained was the truth that had been clear all along. Shedeur wasn't the problem. He was the solution. And the coaching decisions surrounding him were now under more scrutiny than ever. But as the public sided more and more with Shedeur, the spotlight shifted once again. This time onto the future of the Browns organization and the tension building at the top. By the time the dust settled and every analyst, former player, insider, and one truth became impossible for the Browns to escape. This moment wasn't just a bad decision. It was a franchise-defining turning point. The kind that forces owners, front offices, and entire organizations to take a hard look at what they stand for, who they believe in, and which direction they're actually heading. Because while the debate raged on, Shedeur Sanders kept doing what he always does, showing leadership, poise, and a level of growth that no amount of spin or revisionist history could erase. The numbers, the tape, and the locker room's reaction all pointed to the same conclusion. Cleveland finally had a quarterback worth building around. And that's exactly why the tension surrounding Kevin Stefanski became impossible to ignore. Internally, reports suggest the front office was split. Some believe the controversy would blow over. Reportedly felt the decision exposed something bigger, a pattern of hesitancy, inconsistency, and stubborn adherence to old habits that could stunt the growth of the most promising quarterback the franchise has had in decades. Again, these are reports, not confirmed decisions, but they reveal how high the stakes have become, because franchises don't get many chances like this. Quarterbacks with Shedeur's confidence, football IQ, and resilience don't fall into your lap every draft cycle. And when one does, everything in the organization has to align behind him. The coaching, the schemes, the culture, the trust. That's how great teams are built. That's how dynasties start. Not by accident, but by choosing the right leader and giving him the structure he needs to thrive. And that's exactly why Stefanski's future now feels uncertain. Not because of public pressure alone, but because the locker room's trust is the one currency a head coach cannot lose. Once veterans start questioning decisions, once young players start looking to the quarterback instead of the staff for guidance, once outside noise begins echoing internal concerns, a line has already been crossed. The Browns now stand at a crossroads that may define the next decade of football in Cleveland. Do they double down on a coach whose decisions fractured momentum? Or do they fully commit to the quarterback who has already proven he can carry them? Whatever they choose, one thing is clear. The era of Shedeur Sanders has begun, and the franchise must now decide whether it will rise with him or get left behind. When the story of this Browns season is eventually told, people won't just remember the stats, the touchdowns, or the headlines. They'll remember this moment. The night a rookie quarterback played like a seasoned veteran, only to be pulled from the defining play of the game. Moment Cleveland realized it was standing at the edge of a turning point. Because what happened with Shedeur Sanders was never just about a two-point conversion. It was about trust, growth, identity. It was about a franchise that finally found a quarterback capable of commanding a stadium, leading men, and injecting real hope into a fan base that has lived through more heartbreak than most. And when a player like that steps onto the field and delivers the kind of poise, confidence, and production that Shedeur displayed, you don't sideline that, you build around it. That's why the criticism hit so hard. Tom Brady didn't speak as a broadcaster trying to go viral. He spoke as someone who had lived every pressure-filled moment a quarterback can face. Former players didn't jump in to stir drama. They stepped in to correct narratives, the rookie, because what they saw on the field didn't match what some voices were desperately trying to reframe. And now, the Browns organization must confront the consequences. Trust inside a locker room is fragile. Once shaken, it takes intentional effort to repair. Coaches must adapt or risk losing their influence. Players must feel believed in, especially those carrying the franchise's future on their shoulders. And ownership must decide whether the people leading the team are aligned with the vision that matches the talent they now have in-house. The truth is simple. Cleveland finally has a quarterback worth protecting, worth developing, worth betting the entire organization on. Moments like this, the controversy, the scrutiny, the backlash, don't destroy a franchise. They reveal what must change for it to grow. Shedeur Sanders showed he's ready for the wait. Now the Browns must decide whether they are. Because one thing is certain, the era of excuses is over. The era of narrative games is over. The era of hesitation is over. A new standard has been set, and the future of Cleveland football will be defined by whether the organization rises to meet it.